Hey, my friends, Everyday Cyclist, it's Graeme Street, and you're joining me here for another Everyday Cyclist podcast, I believe number 555, if I'm correct. And sorry, it's been a little while since my last video and podcast. It's been a rough May for me, but that's a different discussion we'll go over in an audio podcast coming out. Today we're going to focus on climbing cadence. I got a couple good questions in from customers and readers from around the world about a really important topic concerning leg speed and, of course, strength-to-weight ratio, which, of course, is an important feature for us as everyday cyclists for going uphill. So let's get kicked off here. Starting with Chris. Graeme, what's the ideal cadence for climbing? Pretty vague question because obviously there's a couple of different answers that I could give. But in general, the ideal cadence for your climbing is whatever cadence allows you to maintain forward progress with maximum power output and minimal stress on your body. Well, I know that seems a little bit roundabout as an answer, but that's the truth. And the reason why that's the truth is that I think a lot of people have been led to believe from years back in the Lance Armstrong era, and I'm not going to say anything more about that, that higher leg speed, especially in the hills, was the secret weapon to going uphill faster. I would both agree and disagree with that ideology. And the reason why is that a lot of people assumed, well, if I just get an easier gear, whether it's a triple in the front, whether it's a compact in the front, meaning going from a 39 chain tooth in the front to a 34, and a larger cassette in the rear that can go maybe up to 26, 28, 30 teeth in the rear. If that gear ratio gets smaller, it allows me to spin faster, and that's going to make me get quicker in the hills. Well, thousands, if not millions of cyclists from all around the world that went after that approach, and of course the bicycle industry was all about people going after that approach, quickly learned that just moving to an easier gear and trying to increase your RPM range was, number one, not easy to accomplish. And number two, many people actually saw themselves going slower than they were before. And there's a couple reasons why. First and foremost, to make a higher spin work for you, you have to have a couple things first. Number one, you're going to have to have a supreme level of muscular endurance. We've talked about this at length, and I keep repeating it over and over and over. Muscular endurance is basically the lifeblood of your cycling performance regardless of the hills. Your muscular endurance basically dictates how much energy or how much you can contract the working muscles, the legs, the hips, the core in this case, ongoing, okay, without losing steam. That is the endurance of your muscular contraction rate, is the easiest way to say it. It needs to be high, because if it's low and you're trying to go from an 80 RPM to a 100 RPM or a 90 RPM cadence in the hills, you're not going to get a rate of return for improving your speed and performance, okay? So first, that muscular strength has to be developed to the highest level that you can do. This is where, for me anyway, the Cyclo 90 base training comes into play. It's critical. Once that muscular strength and endurance is in place and your core is as functional as possible, now we can begin to rev up what's called the neuromuscular capacity. That means how well your brain communicates with your working muscles. So we take a muscle that's firing like this, and we want to turn it into a muscle that's firing like this. That's your body talking to your working muscles at a faster rate. And much like any other learning curve, we have to train your body to communicate quicker between those two areas. I know it seems so trite, like, well, my body's going to learn it anyway. You'd be surprised at how many people go out there and ride that are not utilizing or not training their neuromuscular capacity. We do this with our HIIT, our high-intensity trainer sessions. If you've ever done any of my high-intensity training sessions, you know I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to kind of throttle you, number one. I'm going to in 30 minutes, I'm going to take your metabolism, I'm going to shoot it through the moon. But beyond that, I'm also going to help you begin to increase that rate of muscular firing and tapping into your cardiorespiratory system. And that was the mistake that a lot of other riders made at that time and are still making, is assuming, well, if I just get an easier and I spin up the hills, then I'm going to go quicker. Well, if you don't have the muscular endurance, number one, spinning faster is not going to get you anywhere. If anything, you're going to be going off the back. Okay, really, and this is the truth. I see it all the time with riders that are making themselves believe it without actually doing the work that's necessary. The second thing will be is that as riders began to get easier gears and tried to start increasing their RPM rate, they found out, hey, this really isn't easier at all. In fact, in many ways, it's harder Why is it harder? Because now, as we're increasing the rate of neuromuscular capacity, we also have to increase what? Blood flow to the working muscles. That means our cardiorespiratory and cardiopulmonary system, the system that pumps the oxygenated blood to our working muscles and returning the CO2 to vacate our body, has to improve. The efficiency rating has to go up for those systems. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time. Again, within my training protocol, I try to progress this slowly from week to week over the 90-day base, and then we really begin to ramp it up even further come cycle 90 in season, which we really take the muscular strength we've gained from base, tie it into a much faster rate of return, and of course backing that up with a higher threshold or cardiopulmonary ability to pump the working blood. So if you want to just go out there tomorrow and get easier gears and go try to spin up the hills, you're welcome to do so. And I'm not saying you can't see some discernible change. By no means am I saying that you can't improve by improving leg speed. I've said since day one, I will always repeat, leg speed is the secret. If you can learn to get into a position on any gear, in any situation where you can rev up 10 or below 10 RPM from your sweet spot cadence, so let's say your sweet spot cadence was 90 RPM, in any particular gear, you should be able to go from 90 to 100 or 90 to 80 like that without changing any gear. That lets me know that that range, you have a good amount of muscular endurance over on the lower RPM range, and you have a great amount of neuromuscular and cardioaerobic or pulmonary capacity on the high range. When you combine those two together, now we have a weapon. Now we have an asset or a set of assets that we can use in the hills. A couple quick tips in regards to short hills, long hills, and cadence. First mistake most riders make in the hills regarding cadence is coming into the hill with the wrong cadence. You want to see the hill approaching to the best of your ability. It's not always possible. When possible, you want to get into a gear as quickly as you can before the hill starts that begins to raise your RPM from where you're currently at. So if you're currently at 90, you want to raise it up to 100 RPM, give or take. I would recommend doing that without shifting gears first. You want to do it by just simply increasing leg speed, which is what we work on my HIIT sessions for both base and in season. Critical maneuver. Raising RPM, 10 RPM, without changing the gear as the hill approaches. Now you begin to shift into easier gears and keep the RPMs relatively high in the initial stages. If it's a short hill, you keep the RPMs relatively quick. 90, 95, 100 RPM. The shorter the hill, the more I want to increase leg speed. Quick rule. If the hill continues on or upward, now we're beginning to use our gear ratios to accommodate for that. So we don't want to keep revving up to 100, 105 RPM going up. We want to let our cadence begin to naturally slow in the current gear we're in to maximize our power. Again, this is where riders make a lot of mistakes. They'll tend to not be in the right gear, and their RPM will go from 90 down to 70, and then they're trying to gain momentum, and they're cranking it out at 50 RPM, 60 RPM. Once you hit that stage, it's game over. I'm going to put you out the back every time. And the reason why is you've lost forward momentum. The cost for you to try to reacquire is too great. So again, we want to anticipate the hill to the best of your ability, get in an easier gear, let the cadence begin to meet the hill. Once you're now on the hill, now begin to maneuver and shift your gears in such a way that allows you to maintain more of a sweet spot setting. The longer the climb, the lower our shallow gradient climbs, those long out drags. Now I'm using a slower cadence than my base. So typically, instead of my 90 RPM base, I'm dropping down to maybe 87, 85, 83. It doesn't sound like a lot, but as I'm ramping up my muscular strength, I'm dropping the cadence and keeping the gear larger. That gives me the same power output with less tax on my aerobic system. And again, this comes down to personal preference. If you're very, very adept and strong in the cardiopulmonary and aerobic system, then a higher cadence would probably suit you better. If you're more muscular like I am, and my muscles are definitely an asset of mine, I'll tend to be in a larger gear and cranking out a little bit slower RPM. But again, it's dependent on the situation. It's the situation that it makes all the difference. This is why if you're using my Cyclo 90 in season in particular, you'll see a huge array of different both in-ride workouts for outside on your bike, as well as HIIT sessions. I think there's 11 of them in the in-season system that will isolate high leg speed, super high leg speed, super strong muscular endurance, grinding that out at much lower RPMs. We're using these huge ranges of both gearing, tension, and aerobic or neuromuscular demand to create a spectrum for you. So when you hit specific types of climbs, you have different assets from which you can choose from. I don't climb every single climb in my area or anywhere that I go the same way. Absolutely not. I have different variances based on the incline, the situation, and how fast I can maneuver both my shifting and my leg speed to meet the demands of the hill based on my current conditions. So if I'm already huffing and puffing from an acceleration before the hill started, I would be better served by moving to a slightly harder gear to get my heart rate under control and still keep the torque and the power high as I lower my cadence going into the hills. My friends, I hope these tips are helpful. Cadence is everything when it comes to climbing. If you're having trouble with your climbing, if you're having trouble with your cycling in general, and you don't really feel like you have a spectrum or a set of assets from which to choose from, Cyclo 90 Base is always the place you want to begin, regardless of time of year or current fitness level. That's going to lay the foundation of the techniques, the muscular endurance, the neuromuscular capacity. Once that's at least halfway complete, then you can shift to the in-season Cyclo 90, and now we're going to begin to ramp up specifically and advance those techniques and those drills to target climbing events, endurance events, racing events, mountain bike events, road events, the whole ball of wax. But we need that foundation first to get that gain. My friends, I hope these tips are helpful. Please share them with your friends. If you've got any questions for me, you can leave me here on the YouTube channel or on cyclo-core.com. I can't get back to everyone, but I'll do the best that I can. I'm getting ready to go out and ride with a friend right now, so that's why I'm talking a little bit fast. So we speak again. Rather smile on your face, and I'll talk to you later.